Recording. There we go. Hey, welcome again to the Financial Advisor Marketing Podcast. I have a great guest here today. It is funny, Chris. I spend a lot of time having great conversations with people when we're not recording, and then I go, "Oh my goodness, I should have been on the recording." So,
Yeah.
I really should learn to just start recording and then go from there. But I'm going to let you give your background history and one thing or another. I'm going to pick a few of the things you said apart because I think it's going to be a valuable learning lesson for advisors on just learning how to think out of the box, if you don't mind. But introduce yourself, your background, and you might even start right away with how they can go about finding your book and finding your other information. Then we'll of course post in the show notes and recap at the end too as well.
Sure. So given my background, so my name is Chris Panagiotu, and I run a financial planning practice called Capitalize Your Finances. Outside of my business, I also host a nationally syndicated podcast, and I'm a best-selling author. Both my book and podcast are also called Capitalize Your Finances, and the whole framework behind that is being Christopher A. Panagiotu, the Captain Capitalize. I teach people all across the country and the world how to truly capitalize on their money. And if I gave you the bullet point background of who I am and why people should even listen to me, I've done this my whole life. So I'm 32. I'm still a young buck, but I've invested since I was 10. I started really getting into it when I was 16. I was professionally paid at UBS as the youngest advisor in the world at the time. Was in and out in 3 years, went to Morgan Stanley for a short stint, and then started my practice for all practical purposes out of my apartment May 12th of 2015. And you fast forward today, we went from zero with 2 non-competes and not a lot of hope to overseeing about $140 million. And that's primarily with families of high net worth, accredited investors only. And then 20% of our practice is actually constructing retirement plans for businesses as well. And so I've coached my clients and my listeners and my fans on anytime you are thinking about doing something monetarily, personally within yourself, you've got to capitalize on it. And that's where I come in.
Yeah. Let's start with the early history, if you don't mind. In my kind of eclectic background, I was in that category as well, of the youngest who ever did this thing and then this thing. And I got national publicity back when I was 23 for building my first business with about 3,500 clients by the time I was 25. And I talk to a lot of younger people, and I always tell them, number one, don't listen to what anybody older than you are telling you about your skill set and capabilities. But one of the things that if you don't mind, I'd like to ask, you said you kind of, got spit out by or disgusted by the big company and environment. And my experience in working with advisors is the Morgan Stanley types. And, I got my start working with of super high level advisor with Northwestern Mutual, but there's such handcuffs and constraints and limited thinking and restrictive ideas, within some of these big companies. Let's start talking about that. Why at that young of age did you recognize that EBS and then Morgan Stanley wasn't the right fit for you?
So it took a while. It was not an immediate thing. When I was at UBS, and let me actually be crystal clear here. There is a time and place for these big firms.
You bet.
Right. And I can tell you, and I'm making this up. If you're a billionaire, you run all of these crazy companies, you need everything in one place, and you need the bandwidth to do it. There's a really good chance those big three, which it was the big three when back in the day, it was UBS, Morgan Stanley, and Merrill Lynch.
Yeah.
They have everything, right? Like you could get financial planning, you could get tax advice, estate stuff, private banking. Everything under the sun, because they're really a bank that have a face of a planning firm. Well, I grew up in Tacoma, Washington, and there's some old money in Tacoma, but not that type of money.
Right.
And so right off the bat, I thought to myself, well, I don't want to do all of those other things. I want to be at the time, I wanted to get into investing. I didn't even know what true planning was.
Right.
And I thought to myself, okay, strike one was how they were teaching you how to sell.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you've seen this, and I'm sure
Oh,
you
yeah.
listeners have seen this. You
I've
you
ranted and railed about it a number of times, but go
Oh
ahead.
my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, you coach people on, how do you feel about investing? And then they give you a feeling, and then you back in the emotion with a portfolio that matches their feeling, whether it's aggressive or conservative. Then you use different techniques like backing in the wagon. And, you're basically just gathering as many assets as humanly possible. I mean, there wasn't really any wealth creation. It was all wealth transfer, because the big three would basically just transition money during every downturn, and basically whoever could sell the best was able to gather as much assets like that.
Mm-hmm.
That was it. And so that was a huge turnoff, because when I read The Intelligent Investor when I was little, I didn't gather all of it, but the one thing I understood was, you invest in good businesses, you've got to understand them, and if everything works, you cannot help but become successful in the long run. And that was not what the big firms were telling me. So that right off the bat, I knew, just fact of the matter, was wrong. And then there was a lot I didn't know what was wrong, but I went with my gut. And it wasn't until I went out on my own and I started doing my own research. And you fast forward, that's why I wrote my book. I discovered a lot of things that I didn't know how to formulate. But then with my research and data, I was able to back it as to, okay, this is why they're doing things imprudently on behalf of clients.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. Uh, what was your observation about the marketing approach of the bigger companies? That tends to be one of the areas that I am focusing on a lot, and I have a lot of not nice things to say about them. But give me your take on it.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. And again, I'm removed from the bigger firms for a
Yeah,
number of reasons.
yeah.
The only time I'm really involved is when their clients are coming over.
Mm-hmm.
But out of the big three, if I could give, because you know what, by definition, one of them has to be the best at marketing and one of them
Mm-hmm.
has to be the worst. Um, I'd probably say Merrill's at the bottom of the barrel. I mean, frankly, Merrill is not Merrill; it's Bank of America. So,
Right,
let's
right.
get that out of the way.
Yeah.
I would actually say UBS was probably the best of marketing out of the three, because they weren't domiciled in the US. I mean, it literally is the Union Bank of Switzerland.
Right.
So you can kind of do whatever you want.
Yeah.
And even aside from that, though, answering your question specifically, the thing that was frustrating was it did not matter how you marketed yourself. It's UBS or
Mm-hmm.
it's Morgan or it's Merrill. And I get it, but as you know, being a sales coach, and I've coached people on sales before. That's my second book is actually going to be on sales.
Yeah.
It's
Good.
one of those things where people do not fall in love with the brand.
No.
Most They
Yeah.
fall in love with you.
Yeah.
And I was shocked that these big firms don't coach these advisors on the fact that, hey, we've got all the bells and whistles built in, but you are the brand.
Yeah.
And that was a huge issue to me. And then there's ego involved with that as well. Even smaller firms where you've got to realize that, okay, maybe my name is not the best name to have. I mean, shoot, I'll be honest, I'm guilty of this. I wanted to have my name in my business. Now,
Mm.
I didn't do it directly because it's Capitalize Your Finances, not Chris Panagiotu Wealth Management.
Yeah.
But even aside from that, my whole thing was, okay, yes, I'm the one guiding people, whether it's in my business or my show or my book. But the difference is I am just that. I am a guide. I am not, oh my gosh, look at me, I'm UBS, and you
Yeah.
need to basically bow down. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a huge differentiating factor that's incredibly valuable to understand. And so for your clients and your listeners, if you are succumbing to that, you either need to find a new home, or if your home is allowing you to go and market yourself,
Yeah.
need to figure out how to truly become your own brand. And that's how you're going to become successful.
Yeah. And I might expand on that a little bit. Is there's a huge difference between me being a fan of Apple or Tesla or BMW, let's say, as a brand, because they're giving you a physical product, right?
Yeah.
And versus a personal service field. And in a personal service field, it's about what I guess what I see a lot of advisors is they lead with, I mean, you've got all the credentials as well, CFP, CR,
Oh yeah.
PES. They lead with all of that crap, but I've always thought in terms of marketing is competency is expected, right? That's God, I'm losing his name right now, but there's a great marketing consultant out of Harvard, but he described it this way: is there's the expected product, and that's the minimum bar of competency, and then there's the expanded, and then there's the ultimate of whatever the product would be. And I think advisors think that being competent is all they need, and they forget that it's a personal service, is a personal connection, and then they're shocked on why they don't get referrals. They're shocked on why, hell, most clients of most advisors, I would argue that if they meet with them once a year, you could ask the client in the middle of the year who their advisor is, and they couldn't remember their name, much less come up with 5 or 6 interesting things about them, right? And so when they're having lunch with their friend who has need for their services, the last thing on their mind is their guy. And Chris, I'll send you a copy of my book too. I'm going to get a copy of yours. I apologize that I haven't read it before this, but one of the terms, I stole this from Tim Ferriss in 4 Hour Work Week. He talked about the old fat guy, bald guy in the red BMW, and I started thinking of every advisor as the guy in the J.C. Penney suit at the oak desk,
Yes.
using to paraphrase Tom Peters from years ago, their marketing line is, I'm no worse than anybody else, more or less. And that goes back to the investment advice you were talking about earlier too, is everybody doing the same thing in the same way and just rotating between different firms.
Yeah. And speaking of Tim, we're actually coordinating to get him on the show. So shout out Tim. Look forward
Excellent.
to meeting him. Great guy. And that was another thing. So when I left UBS, went to Morgan, that was like the next layer of, because before that, all I knew was UBS.
Yeah.
So when you're at one firm, that's all you know. And so that's all you know. And then when I went there, the only difference between the two of them was the letterhead. The
Yeah.
software was the same investment companies that they outsourced to were the same, the tax management, like every aspect of it was the same. And I think the only difference was Morgan didn't pay as much. So like all things being equal,
yeah,
it was a net loss. And I remember, and I still to this day get recruited rather regularly by all of them. And there is not enough money on this earth to get me to go back.
yeah.
And because eventually it doesn't become about the money anymore.
Oh,
Like
sure.
that's what a lot of advisors don't understand. And I remember once I got to Morgan and I saw all of that, I go, oh my gosh, I got to get out. And not only did I know I had to get out because of that, there were times where I knew, okay, I just need to invest this way on behalf of this client, and you'd get your hand slapped.
Right. Yeah.
So, and part of me, and this is where it gets to be a little confusing. Most advisors, so you got a lot of advisors that they don't know what the hell they're doing. We were talking about that.
Oh, yeah.
Earlier, okay.
Offline.
But then you've got the ones that genuinely do know what they're doing. However, they can't sell worth a darn. And at the end of the day, this is a business no different than any other business out there. Okay. And I tell you that because when I was at UBS, I knew this intuitively, but it wasn't until years after I was out of the big three that I understood this. Let's pretend that you come into my office, Stephen, as a client. Okay. Yeah. I could have the best intentions for you in the world, which I would. But at the end of the day, UBS is a publicly traded company. It is backed by a board that on behalf of the shareholders is supposed to earn the best return on investment for them. Nothing about that is wrong. But as an advisor, you've got to understand that you're stuck between a rock and a hard place, because at the end of the day, you've got to gather as many dollars as possible. Now, one thing that I've appreciated with these independent broker dealers, because our practice is an enterprise group through LPL just because of our size. And there's a lot of them out there, LPL, Raymond James, Commonwealth. I mean, there's a litany of them. The one thing that's nice about the independent route, regardless of where you go, okay, is yes, those companies, some of them publicly traded, some of them are not. Yes, they would like to have more dollars under their management because of volume scale. Duh. But the difference is they understand that penny wise, pound foolish. Meaning, you know what? You give the best advice to this client today, and that means they don't send you money your way right now. They're going to be able to pay you 3 or 4x down the road, whether it's directly with them or indirectly through their people. When you're going out to lunch and you're saying, my guy Chris, like, first off, he has really cool Hawaiian shirts sponsored by Bad Birdie, but then secondarily, he knows exactly what the hell needed to happen. And let me tell you what he did for us.
Yeah.
It's just that little conversation. And for some reason, these big three don't understand it. But at the end of the day, they've got so much under management, they're not going to change their ways.
Yeah. Yeah. The without getting too deep into it, there was an article that I pulled. Yeah, it may have been a year ago now, but it was the new director of the combined Bank of America and Merrill, and they were talking about completely changing their sales approach, and it was all a DEI play. In other words, the too many white males were doing effective at doing nothing but 100 cold calls, outbound contacts a day. So they were going to get rid of 100 outbound contacts a day because women and minorities weren't doing as well on that, and shift them to doing purely cold LinkedIn outreach. And I was just shaking my head in amazement at how stupid that was. One is there's an awful lot of better ways to get qualified, enthusiastic clients to raise their hand than just burning up cold phone lines or cold LinkedIn outreach. But number two, I mean, what your mission is to get the people who are going to be best at selling, best at closing, who are going to create, as long as they're ethical and positive, not to somehow balance it between male, female, different racial groups and so forth. It was kind of just a crazy article, I thought. And as you said, it seemed like they were turning the Merrill sales reps into the equivalent of the Wells Fargo guys sitting there pulling people out of the client base. I must have done 5 or 6 blogs, 4 or 5 recordings, and laughed about that behind the scenes any number of times. Just the stupidity. But on the marketing side with these big companies, well, number one, and your reference to the Hawaiian shirt brand, I didn't catch any. What was her name? Got to get your sponsor in here.
Oh, Bad Birdie, and they're not sponsored yet, but we are in the process of it. So Bad Birdie, coming for you.
There you go. But most advisors would be chagrined to show up in a meeting in an Hawaiian shirt, and it seems like there's this never-ending quest to be the same as everybody else in the industry, not to stand out by specialization, not to stand out by niche, not to stand out by personality. I'm always impressed with, I don't know, I probably looked at a couple thousand advisor websites now. And one of them that I was impressed with was a University of Texas fan. And the site had, the stupid Longhorn bulls on it all over the place. And it was all Texas colors. And by the way, I come from Oklahoma, so I'm anything but a Texas Longhorns fan. But you couldn't miss it. I mean, it completely stood out. It reminded me years ago, my State Farm guy doing my car insurance was a Arkansas Razorback fan. So he went into his office and he had the stupid red pig on his business cards, and he had the banners with the whole thing and the suey pig crap and everything. But being different, I mean, that's important. And in my book, one of the people I pointed out was I'm going to forget his name. I remember the attorney, super high profile attorney. And he was always in like the Western suede jacket with the tassels, with the ponytail. But the point is to be memorable, and to be memorable in a good way, to stand out from the crowd, and to Seth Godin called it be the purple cow, right? To in some way be different than everybody else in the industry. And you can do that with hobbies. You can do that with the way you're dressed. You can do that with all kinds of different aspects. One of the things you've obviously done well, Chris, is the book, the podcast, creating a positioning in people's mind. You've admittedly not isolated your own practice to the Tacoma area, but you broadened out to become a national brand.
Yep.
Talk about a little bit about how you recognized that was necessary and how you went about doing that.
Wow, that's a great question. And there's a lot there. So
yeah,
I
we
would
could go
say,
2 or 3 days on that one.
yeah. So I'm going to break it down. So the first part of that was more so the podcast, book, brand side of things. So it wasn't really until 2020, 2021 for sure, where I knew that I had a huge choice to make. And most advisors in this business, unfortunately, are not that financially successful with their businesses, because it's really hard. And you've got to become obsessed with this business. And most aren't. But if you are one of those few, and I'm so thankful God's blessed me with this, to get to that point, you have a choice. You can either put the thing in neutral and then just kind of coast and just, basically live this lifestyle type of practice. Or I knew that, and again, I was born and raised Presbyterian, so I'm a man of faith. God blessed me with this gift and multiple gifts. I think everyone was blessed with multiple gifts. And it's a disrespect to him to not spread those gifts if you were born with them. So at that point, I said, okay, you know what? I am going to increase my minimums because I can offer a lot more. That's why my minimum's $500,000. I know my worth. But let's think way down the road at Judgment Day. If I want to be able to look the good Lord in the eye and say, I did my best to give everything you gifted me with, that means I would have to go and spread my word in other ways. And so that's when the podcast came about. And then the book popularity demand was there. And so I wrote my book. We hit bestseller last week. That's
Excellent.
Cool. And then it's even gone further. A publishing house, Morgan James, great partner of ours, picked up my first book. And they want to publish my second one, Capitalize Your Sales, next year. We've got a masterclass coming out in January on my framework, where I actually teach people, including advisors, on how to truly plan for their clients. And, starting in 2025, just for fun, my social media team and I are going to be going to sales companies or sales divisions and companies and teaching these people how to capitalize on their sales and capitalize on their finances. Because it's one thing to make a lot of money, but it's a whole heck of another beast to be a steward of it. But the whole purpose of this is I'm trying to throw as much out there as I can. Some of my guests I've had on my show are super investors. So Guy Spear, Robert Hagstrom, Adam Cecil, shout out to all of you guys. I'll see you all at Berkshire next year. And one of the pieces of advice that they wish they took when they were my age was they wish they started giving their advice back earlier. And now that they're not old, but they are older, they almost feel like they have to catch up on the giving side of things. So I've taken that mental model and I've started it now.
You bet.
And so, I think that's super fulfilling. And I'll tell you what, going back to the marketing side of things, there is no better sale or marketing tactic than being absolutely sincere with what you're about.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And even talking about your faith, most advisors are loath to do that, right? And in every way, shape, or form, I tell people you only attract to the extent you repel. And you're only going to attract people by absolute sincerity and transparency, right?
Yep.
And so it doesn't take long to get beyond a plastic facade. And what people want to do is connect. And you said this much earlier about the big companies. People want to connect with another human being that they can identify with, that they can relate to. And if they can't identify and relate to their problems, their drives, their desires, their interests, then they're not really connecting with a human being. And I'm just shocked that advisors can't see that, right? Is that they don't want to wear any of their hobbies on their sleeve. They don't want to talk about their kids. They don't want to talk about their religion. And really, almost regardless of what your belief systems are, what your hobbies are, what your interests are, there's a huge pool of people, if you look across the world and across any given state, that are going to really be aggressively attracted to that if you're sincere, honest, transparent, and sincerely interested in their best outcomes.
Well, and then also indirectly, now this is like, marketing 801, you're probably coaching a lot of people on the 101. So, one thing that has been kind of cool. So outside of planning, I don't compete anymore, but for a while I competed in drug-free bodybuilding.
Oh, okay.
And then before that I did powerlifting, and that was all inspired because I was born with Crohn's disease. And so I never had health. And so that compounded to a point where I said, I will either die trying or I'll get healthy.
Yeah.
And I've been in remission now it'll be 12 years on my birthday.
No, good work.
Which is awesome. Thank you. And my whole point about that is, even on my show, it used to just be me teaching people how to capitalize on their finances. Now we've got super investors coming on. Now we've got celebrities coming on and talking about their financial career, like their career from a financial lens. So if you're a music guy, Maroon 5's drummer's been on my show. He's become a great friend. Shout out Ryan. Alec Ingold, the fullback for Miami Dolphins, just nominated as the Walter Payton Man of the Year. Bro, I hope you get it if you're listening. He's come on the show. And it's been valuable because now we're getting all of these different people. And, it's interesting. One of my all-time favorite podcasts in fitness, Mind Pump, they actually reached out to me and they said, hey, would you want to come down to our headquarters, do a recording? We'll cross-pollinate. And I can tell you right now, not only is that one of the coolest things of all time, but indirectly, because people go, well, how do you get clients out of that? That's not the intention. But I will tell you what, I don't know how, but I can almost guarantee you when people go, who's this kid on Mind Pump? And he's in fitness. Okay, but he's also in that's interesting. Suddenly you see your book sales and your online course go up. Like, it's all about indirect marketing and sales. And that's one of the things I'm going to talk about in my second book. The more genuinely sincere you are getting to know someone with nothing in return, the more money will come into your bank account. Period.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. And I would think the Mind Pump crowd would be a perfect target audience. You have the natural affinity, you have a great backstory, you are one of them, and at the same time, they all need, or a good chunk of them are going to need, either the level of lessons that you can give them through the podcast or the book, or they're going to need direct service and help with their finances overall and their long-term outlook. It's so easy to discount that. It is getting that affinity with a target audience. I had an advisor I was working with, and I just had to beat my head against the wall. They were, in charge of the conservative. They were having conservative party gatherings. They were hosting candidates statewide in their state, one thing or another. Had a podcast. Were on the speaking tour, and I never could get them to transition that to, that's your target audience.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, they thought it was completely separate. I was like, no, I mean, that becomes the target audience because any one of those people in that audience are going to immediately identify with you. And we've been down that path where people, somehow they don't get the connection. In my own world, I've ended up with lots of celebrity connections here and there, but it's because of my martial arts background, right? So, good friend of mine used to be the police commissioner in New York. A lot of people who were actors, one thing or another. Chuck Norris is a good friend of mine. But it's all of that affinity from when you get into, in that case, in the fitness space, there's a huge number of people who are going to appreciate the backstory, the affinity that they have with you. In my case, similar, but it's martial arts. So anyone who has a love and affinity for martial arts, I have an immediate connection.
Yep.
So if you don't really combine that and make the passion and your hobby and the people you're reaching out to, one of the advisors I work with, he's German in descent. He's working on collecting every iteration of the Porsche 911 Turbo. He just set up a thing where he has all the cars in one place. And I keep saying, let's wear that on your sleeve. Let's build the office with the glass wall, and the conference room is here and the cars are over here, and you can theme it all that way. And then we can go market to the Porsche Club, to the local newsletter, the statewide magazine, the national magazine. You can become the columnist, and it's just so hard to get advisors to even get that far out of the box, where they see, here's a whole group of people who are going to just immediately click with me. Why don't I get so heavily involved in that world that they can't not see me as their best go-to?
Well, and then also it's fascinating to me. So like, let's say that everything is clicking. I'm into martial arts, you're into martial arts. It just flows like fine wine.
Yeah.
I would actually say, I mean, yes, that's all easy, but I would say it's just as easy, and I could argue it's more easy if you don't have the same interests. So, for example, let's say that, I don't know, like, okay, so we actually have a couple clients that are super into cars. I wasn't raised to be a car guy. I'm not against it. It's just not my thing. But you know what I love? I love talking to people about their passions, not necessarily because of the passion itself, but because I love seeing passionate people talk about what they love.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'll tell you what, not only is it a genuine, sincere interest for me, it is a sales and marketing technique.
Absolutely.
And people think of it that you're, as advisors, you are going to win on your brilliant knowledge. You know what? At the end of the day, they didn't come to you because they think you're an idiot. So the sale is kind of already there, and you've got to provide these people with good quality plans. I get that, but then it comes down to just being genuine and sincere in getting to know every single aspect about them. And then shockingly, you'll go, well, I didn't really educate them on what I do. And I go, yeah, no shit. Like, that's the point of it is the dollars will come and go. They already trust you on that. But it's when the tide goes out and just bullets are flying, do they know that you're always going to be there for them?
Yeah.
That's it.
And if you wanted to boil what you just said down into a sales technique, the sales technique is learn how to ask questions, probing questions, listen to the answer, and learn how to shut up. Right.
Yeah.
And and by the way, all the academic data, as an academic nerd, on the business side, all the academic data shows, people buy from people they like. And the number one way they get a sense that you like them is you ask about them and you show that you like them. And the way you show you like them is be interested in them. And I, one time I had probably 50 people directly working for me, W-2 employees who were in sales roles. And the ones that were horrible were the ones that like to talk about themselves. And the ones that were really good were the ones I could get to ask probing questions, really listen to the answer, be sincerely interested in their prospects, in their clients. So it's such an important consideration. One of my favorite books is Influence, Science, and Practice, Robert Cialdini. And that's one of his key principles is people are going to know, like, and trust people who like them. And the way you show you like them is you ask questions about them. You're really interested. And by the way, if you ask questions and are not interested, it's as transparent as anything in the world. You've got to be able to ask questions and truly be interested in hearing the answer rather than thinking about what you're going to say next.
Yeah. Oh, and I've had so many of those where I meet people because It's funny. I have no idea how many shows I've been on. I used to keep track, but then it just, then it
Yeah.
kind of goes out the window. And there have been shows where I go on and they're asking questions, and literally it's like, they've got their phone. It's like, uh-huh, uh-huh, yeah, oh, okay. And I'm thinking, are you serious? Like, because here's the thing, we're all busy.
You bet.
And look, I'm slammed. It's year end. I've got a 10-month-old at home. I've got my second book coming out. I'm finishing that. I got this masterclass. We're remodeling like the amount of shit
A
that
lot of
I've
stuff
got
going
is
on. Yeah.
insane, right? And so for me to come and take the time with you, right, which you are not these people, by the way, um, that's a lot. And
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
different than what you've got going on,
You
right? And
bet.
I'm not saying I wrote the book on being busy, but it's amazing how many people, because and this as a host, it is tough getting people on a show.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
Coordinating, background, everything.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, like, the stars aligned for us, but I mean, normally I'm booked a couple months out.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those things where if you're going to have someone on, like I told you at the beginning, my goal every time I'm on a show is to be the best and most entertaining guest that someone's ever had. And then when someone comes on my show, whether it's, video or in a perfect world, when they fly into our studio,
In
because
person. Yeah.
people doing that, I block out the day. I give them the time of day. I give them the capitalized treatment, the Rogan of finance, if you will. And, you take them to dinner, you get to learn about them and what they are, not what they do.
You
And
bet.
so when you go on these shows and you've got someone with, frankly, just a metaphoric stick up their ass that they
Mhm.
just don't understand that, wow, I should probably like actually pay attention instead of treat it like a body count contest of
Oh, yeah.
podcasts. Yeah,
Yeah.
oh, it's disgusting, man. It's
Yeah.
awful.
When do you think your sales book's going to be ready for print?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I actually haven't even finished writing it yet. I've got
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
9 chapters left. I'll tell you what, so much easier to write than my first book
Yeah.
by a mile. And actually, let me tell you, for your listeners, as a quick side note, the advice I would give you, if you've never written a book before, it's going to be stressful regardless. Enjoy the writing aspect of it. That is the most enjoyable part of writing a book. I didn't do that with my first book. And then once I was done, I looked back and went, that was the best part. Because
Mhm.
marketing and the branding and the sale, like that is tough and getting it out there. I've got a great publishing team now behind me, but the first time I was swimming naked. So if you're going to write a book, enjoy the writing, fall
Yeah.
in love with the process. But as far as my book coming out, that is still an unknown. We're probably going to target for later Q3 or Q4 next year, but I'm going to leave that up to my publishing team and my marketing team.
Sure. Well, the one that just became a bestseller is Capitalize Your Finances. So you've got a lot of promotional work to do on that one.
Yes.
I run into, and I've talked to a lot of people on the podcast who, are in the business of putting together a book for the advisors. And the a key element that I see missing oftentimes is that personal element. What makes a book interesting to read is personal stories, is anecdotes. We all know that if you're actually trying to sell somebody on something, people learn and are persuaded through stories, not through data, not through bullet points and so forth. And I'm surprised so many times at how, again, I've got a library full of different advisor books upstairs, and they're all the same, right? They all have the same basic principles. Very, very rarely is there any personal background. Very rarely is there, is a sense of who the person is. And as you said, the writing, I see a lot of times they think that they're going to publish a book, put it on Amazon, and all of a sudden that's going to drive clients for them. Where the way I've always heard it about the big publishers, and I've done a bunch of books, none of them with a big publishing house, but what I've always heard authors who've gone to the publishing house say is that basically all the marketing is on the author, and the publishing house is there to get it in the bookstores. And if you're not out on podcasts, radio shows, one of our team, Lee Meltier, I know when she did her one of her first books, she did 500 different radio shows, just
Mhm.
grinding it out. Any radio show in the country that wanted to have her on, she actually ended up with her own TV show up in Canada on mindset and business development. But you got to be out there marketing it all the time, and you got to know how you're using it. And for the advisors, oftentimes it's a lead magnet. So it's a reason for people to show up at their website. It's a reason to get them in their pipeline. But the enjoying the process of the book then creates a book that people are going to enjoy reading, right?
Yeah.
It's going to end up with all those stories and all those anecdotes and so forth. Again, we mentioned Tim Ferriss. You're going to have him on your podcast, on the Capitalize Your Finance podcast. Uh, but the interesting things about his book is he's in them, right? Is it's about him, it's about the process, it's about a learning curve, it's about personal anecdotes about his mentor book, is about personal anecdotes about mentors. The 4-Hour Work Week was about how he was, one step away from a heart attack and running his own business, and how he figured out how to manage the time management. That's what makes them interesting as opposed to just sterile. And that's
Mhm.
what gets people to read and pay attention to it.
Yeah.
The So on the, we're gonna, God, we could talk for 5 hours. I love talking to you. You're very engaging. I really appreciate that, Chris.
Hey, thank you,
Uh,
man. I appreciate that.
I know we both have a hard break in about 6 minutes. If you could take I don't even want to say new advisor, because the failure rate with I don't have the current numbers, but the big three, UBS, Morgan, Bank of America, Merrill, it's probably 95%.
Oh,
95% of
yeah,
new
I was just
advisors.
gonna say all, but yeah,
Yeah.
go on.
Yeah, I was going to say 95%. I've been paying attention to Northwestern Mutual's training program, and they do such a good job recruiting and such a bad job of teaching people how to actually go get clients, right? Uh,
Yes.
Years ago, when I moved to Denver, I had to get a job before I opened my business for about 5 months, and I actually showed up for every sales job I could find in the paper to figure it out. I ended up working for a health club for 9 months, or actually, I guess it would have been 6 months. But one of the interviews I showed up was the old door-to-door vacuum sales deal. And if you've never seen their sales model basically is they have a group interview of like 100 people. They give everybody a vacuum cleaner to go home and sell their aunt, uncle, mother, father, next door neighbor. And then if they survive that, they put them on basically knocking on doors. And that really feels to me like all of the big companies' approach to their new people is
Mhm.
it's, what's your warm list? Did you go to the frat? Who do you know? Who are your family and friends? Let's go sell them. And by the way, let's go sell them for this guy to put
Yeah.
on his book, which is even the worst part of it. And
Mhm.
and by the time they've worked through their warm list, they're so burnt out they go find a real job.
Mhm.
It's just the strangest way to bring new people into an industry. You mentioned LPL before. I've sat in on any number of conversations of captive advisors, one of them very high level, of looking at going into LPL. One of them was coming from Mass Mutual at a very high level. And it really is the trend right now that all the high performing advisors are either doing or thinking about going independent.
Mhm.
LPL's growth curve is outrageous. Uh,
Uh-huh.
these other companies' growth curves is outrageous, mostly with the 45 and up, 100 million, 200 million, 300 million or more assets under management guys who are recognizing that if they sell their business and they're independent, it's going to be worth a 3 or 5 or 7 time multiple, or just realizing that if they take the handcuffs on and are able to market better, are able to serve the client better, they're going to thrive. Um,
Mhm.
2 or 3 ideas you'd give an advisor in the last couple of minutes here that they should implement to really get a better grip. And we want to remind them all to go to Capitalize Your Finances, the podcast, Capitalize Your Finances, the book, and you
Yep.
have a new program coming out in January.
Yeah, I will do all of that.
Yeah.
So, actually, for new advisors, this is what I would do. I would take 3 months and learn as much about planning as you possibly can. Little biased, I'd pick up Capitalize Your Finances on Amazon. That'll give you a good head start.
Yeah.
But learn, learn, learn. And then once you know that, then you go to every networking event you can. You get as many people into your office as humanly possible, or go to the other person's office, and you educate. You do and guide. You do not sell. You do not sell. You don't become a financial planner. You become a financial pointer. You point these people that you meet in the right direction. And I can guarantee you business will come back to you for that, whether it's directly or indirectly. It will take years, but it will happen. Now, for advisors that have been in it a while and they're looking to go above and beyond, look at how you market yourself, and not by marketing, how you run your business. So like for me, I meet with clients every 90 days. I have an annual meeting, and then I have a call every 90 days to check in. I have a process and framework as a fiduciary. That's why I do it. But also from a sales standpoint, if they mention someone, write their name down, ask about them. Who do you know that would benefit from the relationship that we have? Ask that question. It is not salesy. You're just being genuine. And for those of you that are looking to follow me, again, if you want to buy the book, whether it's paperback, hardback, or audio, head on over to Amazon, type in Capitalize Your Finances. If you want to learn more about my practice, go to capitalizeyourfinances.com. If you want to learn more about the podcast, go to capitalizepodcast.com. We're on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube. And then if you want to get to know more about me on social media, or shoot me a DM, and if you ever wanted me to coach you in your practice on truly sales and capitalizing your finances, you can head on over to LinkedIn, type in my name, Christopher Panagiotu. You can go on to X, type in my name, or Cap and Capitalize. And Instagram is where we're the hottest, and that's where I announce everything, including my masterclass coming out January 2nd. You planners out there, you are going to want this to spread to your clients. So Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, my name, or Cap and Capitalize, I'm always here for you.
Yeah. And I might add, if you're a new advisor, start with your book and my book, because it'll teach you the marketing side of things and how to look at it in a completely different industry way. Hey, it's been great, Chris. I know you have to run. I have to run, but I hope to follow up with you soon, and love to do anything we can to work together and grow both of our circle of influence and impact.
Absolutely, man. Well, and as I tell all of my fans and followers and clients, keep capitalizing. And to you and your listeners, have a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year.
Yeah, and I hope to be out to Seattle way soon to see my daughter. She's out there down the street from you. So great area. I love the Pacific Northwest. Well, thank you very much, sir. It's been great.
See you, buddy.